Right, how are we going to participate tonight? So what we have to do to begin with is try and sense the field. Use your awareness and your present time experience to notice what's happening in your body. Use your imagination, notice what's floating through your mind. Bring your stories, let yourself feel your own story and those of your people, the people that have gone before you. Be authentic, be curious, try and trust the self-organising tendency of the system. I know it sounds weird, but what that basically means is try and sense the process and trust yourself to follow it. Share your experience as best you can. When you're ready to speak, please stand up if you can, or signal for a microphone. Stand in front of the microphone, speak as best you can authentically until you run out of words. And when you're finished, please sit down again and we'll see what the group does with the response. All right, that's basically what we do. Now, so tonight when we speak from our story, we're going to be partly speaking as ourselves, but you could also be very easily speaking for someone who is not here in the room with us tonight. I know it's a weird concept, but this is kind of how the field works. Okay, so tonight we're going to start the forum in a minute, the community discussion part. So if you see one of the facilitators just come and stand next to you, they're just doing that to support you. Okay, to help you speak out, that's all.
Hello. I just wanted to say as well to really, all that are present here today, we're here for an absolute reason. So there's a real magic about why we've come together tonight. So not everybody has come the second night, okay, which is absolutely okay, but the synergy of why we're here is really allowing each other's stories to be healed through one another. So really remembering that focus here of even if one is feeling exposed or vulnerable to share in any way, that it's about allowing that part of yourself to come forward and break that silence or that patterning that's been, there for a long time. And remember, we can share over there. So if you feel the inkling to say something, but you don't want to be filmed, and I know how that feels like, just stand over there and say something in that corner so you can still have the opportunity to use your voice and let it be heard in a safe way.
Thanks, Annie. That's awesome. All right, guys. So I fade into the background now. And we just sort of feel the atmosphere and see how we go.
So I sent Imogen an email which was kind of a meta-analysis of thoughts. This is my opinion of what the problem is. These are the issues, here's what we should address, what's capable, what's in scope. Because that didn't belong here. Because obviously this would be just the usual, this versus that. So obviously this is a forum where we all get an insight into each other. And I appreciated the broadness of the presentations last night. So my perspective was I have a DV against me. Now, she said it was at Dandenong, so I went around to Dandenong police station twice and said, take me in. Didn't take it seriously, that's a big laugh. It's a fake DV. They sent me away, sir, stop wasting my time. But if I actually look within, I've been married to this woman, she knows my heart. So she knows what I was thinking I wanted to do, and she liked it on the basis of her fears, which were probably, to be honest, pretty real. Nonetheless, I had given her no reason to be afraid. It's just like you know your partner. So I guess it does take a little bit of change of mentality from the obvious to the underlying. And I realised my perspective was, yes, probably one, a bad thing has been done to me, I am vengeful. In a similar situation, a bad thing was done to my son, he tried to kill himself. Different way, different violent response. Obviously, it's the same problem. Someone's being harmed by someone else being bad. So yeah, look, even though I said, this is all very funny, I learned something about me. You have any questions?
Thank you for sharing, Jen. We'll sit with it. That's our challenge. But thank you. That's brilliant. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Jess. We'll just sit with it.
I'd just like to say that I was quite affected by Angelica's shame, what's it called, overhead slide, that's the name for them now. So I'm 73, but I think that anybody that was brought up the way I was brought up, perhaps in country Victoria or rural places, I was brought up in Melbourne, so it's my age, but over a certain age we were brought up as women, particularly to do behaviours that led us to that shame. And so I think that that should be available for basically anybody that is in that category. I'm sorry if I'm not being direct here. I think that's the most wonderful slide, and I think a lot of people need to look at that, particularly any male that has been abused also. But yeah, that's all I'm happy to share at the moment, and thanks for that, Angelica. And yeah.
Can you hear me? I think the shame, that shame aspect, it goes through, it flows through everything really. It's something held by the perpetrator as well as the person that's had the violence, whatever form that takes. They're both holding shame, and I feel that the perpetrator is that part of that is to it's almost in denial of the shame, so they're trying to attack the shame, but really it causes a loop, so that they're just feeding it, so that it goes around and around.
Just speaking more on that shame, and what I'm really becoming present to right now is tuning into when shame happens in the body. So just thinking about shame and silence, and coming from a perspective from myself of, a lot of my life I've had a lot of different forms of trauma and violence and been in many near-death situations. And thinking about that now, I realise that my own silence kept me feeling held to that shame for a very long time. So funnily, before I came here tonight, a very interesting little thing happened where even now, I'm been a practitioner for almost 20 years. I'm still a person. I've still got my own kind of personal self. So still I will be triggered by various things. But what I've found the necessary remedy for me to deal with those things is actually standing up and speaking about them. So funnily, a little thing happened before when I was with my kids where a man was being quite aggressive to me, just a stranger being aggressive in a safe environment where I take my kids to a class of something. And when that happened, my immediate thing is, do I say something? Do I go up to the man? I didn't like the way how he spoke to my kid. My kid is coming up to me and saying to me, "Mum, I don't like how that man spoke to me." Now, coming from a background of my own shame and my own levels of varying violence and abuse, it always hits me very deeply. So I'm kind of that point of going, okay, I need to say something. So I go into the mindset, how am I going to say something? How do I deal with this? What do I do? What should I say right now? So I approach the situation very politely and just matter-of-factly, look, you might have not realised the way that you said that to my daughter was really affecting her. Maybe next time, if you have a problem, please come and address it with the parent. I'm the parent. So that didn't go down very well. And that man got quite aggressive towards me in a public place, in a public setting, just about an hour ago, or maybe an hour and a half ago. And I named it straight away that I said, if you're feeling uncomfortable with your anger, that is something that you need to be with. But I really ask you the importance of you need to take boundaries when you're approaching people's kids. It's not okay. So as I'm saying that, I'm saying it with great anxiety. A lot of anxiety is happening for me as I'm saying that earlier on this night. And, you know, it's almost that point of that anxiety mirrors those traumatic experiences of when things like that have got out of hand in the past within my own life. And my body at that time has that memory. So it's starting to feel panic. There's a lot of panic going on about, you know, I'm feeling unsafe, there's trauma, there's aggression. So in my mind in that time, it's like I'm trying to heal that part of me from past times where was silent, where wasn't able to do anything, where wasn't able to say anything at the time. So all of that's happening in this, 2-minute interaction. So it kind of progressed a little bit. And, the guy told me to get out, to shut up, to fuck off and get out. And as that happened, even though I had this immense anxiety, I kept standing up and saying, I'm not comfortable with how you're speaking to me. Now you're verbally abusing me. Now what you're doing now is offending me. I'm feeling unsafe, and my kids in this group is feeling unsafe from the way that you're behaving. Now, in the past, I would never have been able to say that. So it's almost, I find it necessary to take that voice from that younger self who never had it. So in that time, things were getting quite crazy, and, the man's in my face, and I'm feeling like, we're going to have an altercation, and I'm pretty sure he's going to hit me. But something inside of me still stood forward and kept saying, I'm not okay with this, and I'm going to call the police if you say that one more time. So my fear at that moment was enabling me to access the other part of me which could use my voice. Even though I still felt shaking and I was able to see all my triggers and what it's brought up for me, there's something so powerful about using my body's triggers in that way in order to do something with that. Because one, if I say, well, you know what, I'm going to let it go. It's okay that he spoke to my kid that way. I wasn't comfortable about it. They didn't like it. I'm going to let it go. If I did that, what would happen to me in that moment was I would feel shame, deep shame about not being able to stand up for myself, stand up for my kids, not saying what I need to say. So there's something about in me taking that stance of a warrior and going, I am not fucking okay with that, and that is not on. Even if there's immense fear and anxiety about it. There's something about healing that part that has a wound from the past and helping it gather itself so it can rise from that place that's been frozen and create a new narrative. So as I said, as that happened, I was strong, but I was shaky, but it had to be done. And that man, it was very evident that no one stands up to that man, that he was shocked that I even brought this up with him, how dare I even approach his space? So that was the vibe I was getting for him. But for me, it was like, that is absolutely offensive that you conduct yourself in that way and you justify it and you think it's okay, because it's absolutely not. So why I feel like saying that is because that impulse in people that are trauma survivors, that have had levels of abuse, of violence, being sexual or, or verbal or physical, it's like that imprint still is there, but it can be managed and worked with in a very organic and healing way. And it's like understanding that and breaking those patterns by honestly that speaking. For me, it's like just say something, even if it's excuse me, even if I had no courage after that. It's important, because times where I haven't said anything, or if I've found that someone has perhaps sexualized me in the way they look at me, and I've walked away going, I feel really uncomfortable about that, and I feel disgusted. And it's like I've taken on that person's energy. So it's very powerful to work with one's own anxiety and one's fear in action as it's happening, even though it looks very messy. So it was a really great opportunity about an hour and a half ago. I felt happy to have it. It was good. That's it for now.
So I'd sort of follow on from what she said. I work in childcare. I think about 6 years ago, I sort of have an issue with the Privacy Act with children. You can't, if a child hurts another child or if there's an altercation, you're not allowed to mention to the parents that who did it. And I was working with 4 families that were police officers, and they were 5-year-old children, and one of the children hit the other police officer's child, and they just came up, and I was sort of saying that your child got hit by another child, and like all the children came up and just told them who it was. So I just said who it was, and I was just sort of thinking, well, if the police can't discuss it between themselves, and in a sort of a nice way that doesn't hurt the child's feelings, and they can just actually manage the behaviour. But if the police can't do that, who can? And I do sort of feel that when children are in an argument, they are just made to separate, or one of them's punished, and they're not demonstrated the words to use, or given the words to use. And I think even just at the age of 2, they generally say, "Stop, I don't like it," and just keep to that. And I feel a lot of children you can just extend it to say, "Stop, I don't like it," and then go on, and then it can expand from there. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere if we don't teach the children how to express themselves.
Hello, my name's Ward. Not used to being behind the podium or being naked in a church. Of late, last 3 years, I've been working on my own traumas, my own concepts of what a victim is. For tonight, I started writing a page of where I've been victimised, problems in my life, and even the concepts change as we learn. What is rape? What is it? Physical? Is it mental? Psychological? All the above. The traumas of upbringing. I had a mother, which I still struggle to forgive, but I've tried hard and help. Forgiveness, I think, is something that seems to have disappeared in the last decade. In the late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2010, in Tantra circles, yoga circles, a whole bunch of different things I tried to get through my stuff. Forgiveness and understanding was a key component. And I still believe there's a lot to forgiveness. Now, in hypnotherapy, apparently my mother tried to kill me. I don't know how true that is, but one counsellor tried to smother me when I passed out. She gave up on that idea. The same counsellor went on to rape me. by the specifications. Specifications are a cold word, but you get the drift from what I've learnt what rape is since. She did convince me at the age of 4 or 5 that was my last night to be alive. So my first time I died was around 4 or 5. And she took a Polaroid of it. I've still got it. Now, I think at that stage I was also screaming to not be dragged to Sunday school. And to this day, I still can't go anywhere near the Cheltenham Church of Christ. Full stop. I don't know why. Because I've learnt through the therapies there's such a thing as over-therapy. If it's packed away and it doesn't affect me today, leave it alone. And there's many other things that have affected me and I have chased out. I ended up writing 2 pages of assaults, victimisation, rapes, miscellaneous stuff-ups. And I haven't been good either. Probably the worst trauma, and it took me a long time to work this out, was not being violent towards a woman. I've never been violent towards a woman. But I've been deceitful. I've cheated on a woman. She loved me. And I changed her world. Because she loved the wrong person and couldn't deal with commitment. I didn't have the balls to deal with that and say, hey, it's not working. So I did it the weak man's way. Cheated on her, made sure I got caught. Through all the trauma, dramas, arrest, and 3 years of psychotherapy with a beautiful person I see now in Clematis. And I've gone a long way. I've learnt a lot. There's been 2 areas where I think I've exhausted the expertise of psychologists, psychotherapists, kinesiologists, tantra practitioners. And the one I'm stuck on is the concept of victim. Now this is multi-level in my stuckness. It is political. It is social. It is personal. And for the last few years in particular, as I'm watching the world go crazy around me, we've developed this ideology. Actually, I won't use singular. Ideologies. Gender politics, racial politics, Me Too politics. None of it's straightforward. And I've learned even the Me Too politics, I'm going to bring this right round, right back down to I found some sort of spiritualism along the way. They've all got good bits in them and worthwhile bits, but also got negative bits. And there's a whole heap of men out there who are sick of being told we're white, we're evil, we're monsters, we're male. Yet at the same time, the Me Too movement does good things. More and more women are speaking up. More and more people are speaking up. That's great. But the politicised part of it, and this goes back 3 weeks ago, this made me really angry. The Me Too movement did 3-part series with Tracy Bartram. Tracy, name's Bartram, Tracy, journalist. 3 days later, Virginia on ABC in the mornings brings in the police chief. Hey, we have this huge violence issue. It's gone nuts. The police have never received any more phone calls. Now, I've learnt this way of thinking through psychotherapy. There's always 2 sides to everything. One side you could go, yes, there's more violence, we have to fix it. It's a problem. It's out of control. The other way you could look at it is we've never had more calls to police because Me Too is working. People are speaking up. People are ringing the police. They're making an effort to get out of abusive relationships. Well done. What a great thing. But when it's politicised, there's a whole group, and this is why I'm really disliking this men-women thing. It's divisive. There's a whole group of men out. We got incels. We got MGTOW, men going their own way. I've got mates like that. When I grew up in my world, it was toughen up. I'm a tradesman. I worked my life mostly in Bayswater. I drink with all these men Friday nights. It's changed a lot since I was a kid as an apprentice. It is no longer acceptable, even men's talking shit over beer, to put down women. Men don't accept it. And I've watched it change, and it's a good thing. The problem I'm seeing politically, and I'm going to take this back to political, a bit of history. Hitler used the victim mentality of poor Germans and poor us to pick on the Jews and any other race. He picked division, and the Germans were beaten down. They had it really hard after World War I. So they were oppressed, they were poor, and they picked a group that were, what's privileged? Anyone more privileged than me? What's wealthy? Anyone wealthier than me? What's old? Anyone older than me? It's a tactic. In Hitler's days, he used race. In Marxism, to me, Marxism equals Hitler times 10 more bodies dead. Marxism was good. It was oppressed versus oppressor. It was power politics. All these things are diverse, create separation. Separation is only useful if you're into power games, and power games are dangerous. That's why I started back 10, 15 years ago with power games weren't here. It was forgiveness, love, care. It means something. It brings people together. It's about caring for each other. There's another twist to this. And I've been really looking at this personally and on. There is such a thing as pathological empathy. There is such a thing as pathological compassion. Anything in too big a dose can turn pathological. The mother doesn't let the children play and hurt themselves. The parents, and these days he uses parents because it could be mother or father, doesn't change. It's not gender specific. And I reminded this from what was said earlier. Two children have a fight. How do we learn not to hurt each other? Any child psychologist will say is, well, the 3-year-old hit the 3-year-old, they both hurt each other, now they know not to hurt each other because it hurts. But if we really care too much, we stop them from hurting each other. How they learn how to play properly with other children by their own pain and accidents. There's this beautiful thing to protect everyone so much from themselves and protect our children from scratching or breaking a knee or a finger or anything to such a degree that it turns around. I look at quite a few guys in the weekend, and side note, I teach fear of sorts. I'm a skydiving instructor. That's my main job. Has been for a long time. Now I get students turn up because they sign something, they're safe. And it's like, part of my job as an instructor is you are responsible for not dying. It's an odd thought. You can see the head spinning because everything in this life says you're safe. And it does a few of my students' heads in. And you know who's the strongest students I have that give me the least trouble? The 25 to 35-year-old female. And this is another psychological thing most men don't understand. I've looked at this. Most women live in fear most of the time. It's almost a natural state. It's almost a mothering state, because you're far more sensitive to things that could hurt you or your children. Don't start with the biology. And this postmodern thing tends to forget biology. It goes both ways. You want to start with a man and really cause him to be wound up, play with his sexuality. It's not good. The same natural instinct of women, and we are different biologically, regardless of some of the political stuff I've read recently. We should be honouring each other for our differences and supporting each other. I train big tough boys these days. They're the first to sook and cry and freeze. I've seen it before and I'm seeing more of it. Last weekend, 3 tandems, 1 plane load on camera. 2 girls, 25, 26, screamed all the way. The big tough boy with all the tats, I think he wet his pants and he wasn't getting out that door because he'd never been challenged. Fear. I'm afraid through empathy and over-caring for everyone, we're building a society where responsibility is someone else's problem. Traditionally, women, whether you realise it or not, as a young woman, got pregnant, here comes responsibility. It's the first time in your life you got someone bigger, or usually smaller, but meaningfully bigger than yourself to care for. Responsibility was there. And your love and extra care instinct for empathy made sure the infant was safe. Men had to learn the responsibility. And the first thing we learned was by accident. I had 2 children early. You could call this even, by today's standards, illegal. She was my boss. She was 17 years older than me. She was the manager of this grain winner Toyota spare parts. 3 months after working under her, I'd shifted in. 2 years later, I had 2 children. So responsibility came to me very early. Technically, by today's standards, that would be illegal. If that was a 35-year-old man that ended up with a 19-year-old girl and getting her pregnant at home, the world would turn to shit. I don't see that as a problem historically. I get it, but I just picked up my brouches and took on responsibility. What we're missing in this economically, this power thing between men and women, which is hit at you from every angle. Just look at the last 4 weeks. This poor woman lost herself, her family, because of her husband. Everything on the news is bad men, bad men, bad men, bad men. It's like a subliminal training that is some sort of power relationship. It's wrong. As a society, the best thing we should be doing is supporting each other and promoting personal responsibility. And things are changing. Facebook changes things. It's the biggest amplifier we've ever had. A small voice goes a long way. A really long way. In one state, and by the way, we're not just upsetting men versus women here. We're upsetting young girls. We've got boys in their 20s that are little boys. These little boys are suddenly in the mid-30s, I better have a family or something. These little boys that never had responsibility, drugs not good enough, let's have some alcohol. What are we building? Little boys in men's bodies that are lethal weapons. Most of these men just commit suicide when things go wrong. We talk about averaging one woman a week, and I'm not going to get into statistics because it's just part of feeding the problem. But there was over 3,200 suicides last year, the same year before that, the year before that, and the year before that. Society has big problems. In one recent scientific statistics thing, whatever you want to call it, Jonathan Haidt, sociology professor, he's worked out figures in 2009, 2010, and this is what they call some sort of corresponding science. It's about the same time parents gave their old iPhone to the teenagers. The self-harm rate for girls 10 to 14 in one state in the US has risen since 2010, 169%. The self-harm rate for young ladies or teenagers 15 to 19 has risen 90%. There's a biology to that. The feminine tends to take it out on each other and themselves. So young ladies are being arseholes, take it out themselves and each other. They pick on each other. Young men are being arseholes, take it out on each other. Go out and get drunk and punch each other up. Either way it's bad, and either way responsibility is missing. Through doing this research, I have lost a lot of faith in the psychology, humanities. In the last year, 50% of journals have been removed as false. That's sad, because the humanities department in the last 10 have been fighting each other for funding and money. Studies of feminism, studies of masculinism, study of trans, study of this. It's like a overlap and who gets the most money game. Who's the most outrageous wins. In the meantime, we suffer. In the meantime, everything in media amplifies on itself. There's one little lesson I learnt. When things get too hard, the TV goes, Facebook goes, the computer turns off. Because it just winds me up further. The reason I've come last night and tonight is I really care about looking for fixes. I understand there's a lot of trauma in this room, there's a lot of trauma in our society. I'm really want to accept the trauma we all carry. But we need to look at ways to fix it. The reason my hate of the current political nature is it stops discussion. And how do we fix things if we can't talk to each other? You want to stop someone dead in their tracks in a discussion? Call them sexist, racist, homophobe. No one's learnt anything. The conversation stopped. It may be true, it may not. My perfect example of this was, and this was an actual discussion where the first time my lovely psychologist stepped in, was the policeman that got stood down for suggesting what pushed this man to snap. And the word pushed versus he has no right to, it's a monster thing to do, which is all fair. It's all fair. I get it. But what I don't get is the conversation stopped. And I really want to push for conversation and ways to move forward. Being a victim is a step one. And that's what's been advertised as the right thing to do in the political agenda. We're all victims. You're victims of something. I'm a victim. But that doesn't help me. What's the next step? Because I don't want to live it like that. I want to live as a good person. I want society to be happier. Thank you.
Thanks.
So what stood out for me yesterday, one of the things that stood out for me when we heard the speakers yesterday was that we had some really strong women up on the stage. We had women who had risen through the ranks of their professions, who had become CEOs, who had positions of power, who had positions of responsibility. And they were doing that really well. And at the end of it, they all had a story which involved violence directed against them. And they were statistics that they came out with that were horrific. And you can't hide from those statistics. I think what's reported is probably underreported. It needs to be reported more. I think the best disinfectant is sunlight. And I think I can understand why there's anger. I think I can understand why there's fury. I don't know if it's justified. It needs to be expressed. It needs to be understood. It needs to be spoken about. And I think we need, as men, we need to stand up and we need to accept that we have played a role. We have played a role, whether we've been conscious of it or unconscious of it, we have played a role. And we need to understand what we have done. And we need to understand what we can be doing differently and better. Because these statistics are unacceptable. They just can't go on. This is not the kind of world we want to leave for ourselves, for our children, and this is not the kind of world I think any of us would want for our loved ones. As men, you've got to be strong. We're providers, we're protectors, and if we're not doing that role, we're not being men.
Gorani started saying that women are strong. Ward pointed out strong women in his experiences after stroke. My t-shirt's called me to be worn last night was Rosie the Riveter, if you can't recall. It's the picture of the American woman behind the scenes. I'm a strong woman, right? I wore it because it called to me and said, up yours, Abbott. So men are confrontational. Women know they're strong. Men have to have confrontation to prove it. Oh, I've been a skip trial 16 years. I know from looking at pain thresholds when people break a bone that women have a higher pain threshold. Women are strong. Men tend to be a little fearful. And we're not all alphas. So when it comes to being, you're going to exert power, that one's weaker. That way I can prove I'm a strong man. I said I wouldn't generalise, but I think that could be occurring in some situations.
From listening to the gentleman, perhaps especially, I can't remember, Jeff? No, Colin? You, Jeff, it is Jeff. Okay, sorry for pointing. What about this concept of manhood and womanhood, of strength, man strong, woman not strong? We've got something wrong there, haven't we? Yeah. That these things are still there. Man, fighter, woman. Women aren't always the ones that don't fight. Many cultures, women have been warriors, and they have been matriarchal societies. And I'm not a great person for history, but I know that little bit. So that's all I want to say is if anybody else has got any thoughts, what about this concept of man being man and being woman? Because I know women don't, as I know it, feel as threatened about not being womanly as men do. And men are very fearful, and they're not to blame, and it's not an ego thing as it seems sometimes. It's more that they've got it ingrained in them that they should be strong, that they should be all of these things. The provider. Ward said the provider. Why does the man need to be the provider? I mean, you know, some women, I know my son's wife is far better equipped to be the provider of the family and in fact earns more money. My baby son, he loves her. He's got a different view of manhood. My baby son, I'm glad that he hasn't had that man thing in him, that he has to marry somebody that's lesser or he thinks is lesser in some way, because this woman is not lesser in any ways. She is a very strong woman. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say. That's the concepts. I hope somebody else might have something better to add to it.
The strongest men I know are the ones who can cry.
Yes.
The strongest men I know are the ones who can be vulnerable in their feelings and stand naked in the fury of a woman. When that force of nature moves through a woman.
They're confusing times. I couldn't agree more with strength in women. Could not agree more. There's nothing more humbling than being exposed truly to a woman. Men fight, but I still bring back biology. We're fighting to be chosen. There's a history there. Mother Nature, nature chooses, women choose. You're very powerful, and everything in the media today is telling you you're not. I think that's wrong.
I'm feel like I need to speak because for a long time I have been silent. And I've come out of the secret space too to do it. Last night's session, a lot of the things that we heard, a lot of the language that was used, it was all very familiar to me. And it was language that I've been exposed to since coming out of a domestic violence marriage. A marriage that I was in for 13 years. A marriage that I brought 2 daughters into. I've had lots of people tell me over the last few years and prior to me actually escaping this situation with my daughters. I've had people tell me I'm a strong woman. I've had people try and encourage me by telling me that I'm a strong woman. And every time I hear that, I feel like I need to correct people and say, no, I'm not strong. I'm not strong at all, because inside I'm broken, but I'm surviving. And the reason why I survive is because I've got these young people that I have to help guide them through and try and help them to recognise that things can be different. I don't know if I'm doing it well at the moment. I suppose that's what's brought me to this session, is because I know that I've gotten to the point where I've shut down, and it's easier to shut down and to remove yourself from a social community. And it's easier to, I've lost friends of mine. I have two very good friends of mine that I've maintained, that I often speak of the cave, and I speak of the moat that I intend to dig around this cave, and I am going to fill it with all manner of vicious creatures. And I actually breed parrots now, which can be quite vicious, so I'm working on it. And I've got a dog that barks a lot. But having said all that, like, I'm surviving, and my children are surviving, and the space that we're in, the cave we're in, is a lot healthier than it was 6 years ago. And my children are thriving. By giving them that safe space, they're stepping out and they're learning and they're engaging much better than what I am. And when now I've gotten to the point where I watch these two young women, and now I'm really starting to question myself. And I'm seeing these young girls who are 18 and turning 16. And I'm recognising that, okay, I've given them the opportunity to do this, and they are moving forward. And they're starting to be an example to me, that they've managed to come through and overcome a lot of trauma at their young life. And I think I put it back to the fact that they're young and they haven't got a lifetime like their mum of traumas behind them. Because mum's at the point now where I want no more pain. And they're still starting. So it's like they've experienced that first hit of pain, and we've dealt with that as best we can, and they're now stepping out in a new world where there is a different conversation. And I really believe that the young men that they're engaging with, I think, in a lot of ways are different to maybe the men that I met when I was growing up. I believe there is change. And I suppose what it comes down to now for me personally is that I sit in my safe space and I have these conversations in my head, and I know the language, I know a lot of the psychology, I know what I read on social media, and I'm on the deck and I'm thinking that maybe I've got something more to give. But to do that, you do need to talk, and the silence needs to be broken. And so that's why I think taking this step and actually engaging in a forum like this has been for me, I suppose it's a step out back into life. And one of the things that I found really encouraging is that we've had men here. We've actually had a good representation of men, because when we're at home and we're sitting on our computers and we're reading what's on Facebook and you see all these emotional comments coming from women, and it's only on the very rare occasion that a man, and I don't know, I sort of do believe that comes down to that once you've put something in writing, it exists. And I think maybe us emotional women folk, we tend to just maybe let that, not mentioning any names, I do it too, but maybe we let that out, and that's maybe a safe space for us to let that out. Whereas maybe with the gentleman, maybe it's more difficult to put it in writing, because then it exists in black and white, and it can be, looked back on. And I think that's what's different here, is the fact that we're here as a community and there's no keyboard warrior here. We're just people. We're existing. We've all got a story. And obviously, I think we all have trauma, which has led us to be involved in this. And I just think it's a really positive step forward. So I just wanted to say thank you. And side note, I went home last night, and I don't know about everyone else. I'd like to hear how everyone else actually dealt with what we heard last night. But I went home, I went to bed, and I actually slept until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Because that's the impact that having this really open, I found it really exhausting, but still, I'm here, I'm back. So, and I'll sleep well tonight too. So, thank you, everyone.
I have to say I was the opposite. I think I didn't get to sleep until about 1, and then I was up at about 5. And then I walked for about 2 hours. Got a lot of thoughts about it. But just thinking, I'm sort of trying to find, there's so many things I can think about, just trying to reel it in. That with the gender role thing, I think working in a Montessori school sort of taught me, and I've worked as a temp in childcare and worked in about 200 to 300 different childcare centres over about 10 years. And the whole sort of evidence-based practice thing, I think out of all them centres I worked at, there's probably only about 10 staff members that I've worked with that can do the positive thing really well. And it's very few, and sort of when I say really well, in the Montessori schools, they have 3-year-olds using real irons, and I think they're the practical skills that instead of having either boys or girls just playing with dolls, they're actually doing practical things so that when they're adults, they can do the practical thing. But at the Montessori school, they didn't really fit into that 10. I think they did struggle with boys a lot. I think they do learn slower and they might be more aggressive. I think a lot of the boys I worked with are really the ones that I feel are even more sensitive, just at a young age, might pinch, and a lot of the women are really aggressive. I sort of went home thinking last night, women, I don't think the aggressiveness goes to that point where the child's at threat of being beaten. But there's still a lot of women that believe that, you know, how will the children learn if they're not punished, and have that mentality. And I always try and remember to say I always talk about women, but I only work with women. I think it'd probably be worse if there were more boys in the childcare industry, more men. But I don't know. But yeah, I think when I started, there was only about 3% of males in the industry. But also when I first started, I was told that childcare is the easiest course to get into from high school. And just when the teacher sort of brought that up and she asked the girls in the class, a lot of them had dropped out of school in year 10 and then sort of grown up a bit and got into it. And it wasn't something they really wanted to do. It was just the easiest course. And yeah, I think we just need better education for everyone, just to be able to develop critical thinking skills. I worked in Marysville after the fires in the childcare centre, and there was a girl who could shimmy up an 8-foot pole and then climb across the monkey bars. Sort of going back to what you were saying about people who are too scared to wrap them in cotton wool. But I went to school in Hillsville, and as a part of outdoor education, we did risk assessment through rock climbing at the cathedrals. And I'd sort of put that in practice to teach her how to crawl across it with me. And I got her to not move until I was one sort of rung in front of her. And then she wouldn't move until I put my hand on her back, and then I'd tell her she could move. And I sort of disagree with that, just letting them go and learning fear. But I think it can be done in a really structured environment. I think through it's sort of in the Montessori manner of breaking it down into really clear steps, and then pushing things in a safer environment that are really scary. But I got told off for doing that because she was 8 foot high on monkey bars. But she had a lot of trauma, and I think she was probably a seeker in terms of having a sensory processing issues. I just sort of learned a bit about that recently. And they had to put her in a high chair even though she was about 2.5 years old. And I felt it was a restraint. I don't think any 2.5-year-old should be tied to a chair just to eat. And yeah, I felt getting her to climb across the monkey bars, she'd learned to listen to me. And I have practiced that with kids, and just seen sort of them 10 people that I've worked with that can do it well demonstrated I was pretty sceptical of the whole positive reinforcement rather than smacking everything. But I have learned that it can be done, but it's completely separate from our culture. And it's a really hard thing to unlearn our culture to do it. But yeah.
Imogen keeps looking at me. Sorry, you should say something. Two things that have come to mind for me tonight. One is the concept of being a provider, which you touched on. I worked 20 years, probably 18 hours a day. From my point of view, that's not a provider. It's because you're not there emotionally, you're not there physically, you're not there mentally or anything like that. So I feel more of a provider now because I do the school drop-off, I do the school pick-up, I do homework, I work my hours around the kids.
You didn't know that at the time, though, like me.
No. Yeah, that's true. The other thing that comes to mind is that we talked about kids and separating kids out and not teaching them about responsibility and owning their own behaviour. You have auditory learners, visual learners, kinesthetic learners, And with my own kids, I kind of got to the point where I was tired of them saying sorry and not meaning it. One day I actually got some plates and I made the kids throw them on the ground and they smashed. I said, now say sorry to the plate. Did it fix it? No. Now you can clean it up. Like, you created the mess, you can clean the mess up. And it kind of taught them that sorry is just a word without backing it up and without changing your behaviour. So I think I feel like more of a provider now doing things like that than I ever did working full-time, 18-hour days. And taking each of, say, my 3 kids and the way they learn, rather than trying to force them to learn the way society wants them to learn, I don't think necessarily works. But certainly the plates worked.
A quick, funny story about culture shock. April the 1st, 2001, my wife died. She did get the last laugh. 2 days before, running a wrecking yard, 6 mechanics, 2 front counter, 2 drivers. 2 weeks later, doing my day a week, Tarlena Primary School, teaching 5 to 8-year-olds. That's culture shock.
Yeah, I'm feeling it too. It's a nervousness, it's a fear. Should I speak? Oh, no, And I know it really, really well. Over the course of my journey, which has been pretty horrific, I've been very open, I've been very public at times. But there were just short windows, because in that articulation and in that speaking, looking back over the trajectory of the insanity and the madness of what I've faced and what I've gone through, speaking my truth has been very confronting to people. It shakes. That shake in me is like what shakes the world up in a way to face itself. And for people who have acted out of integrity and in destructive ways, it invites them to see themselves, I suppose. But looking back over the trajectory, it's what set me free. In the most unimaginable ways, that cage of that fear that's like rattling away, it's I would never have dreamt in my wildest dreams that by speaking, first of all, with a perpetrator and keeping him updated every single step of my hellacious journey, is what eventually set him free, because he was able to begin the journey of forgiving himself before he died, and I'm talking about my father. And that was a miracle. It was a miracle. I never thought I'd see the day where he would actually look at his actions and look at himself. And he did that in the last 6 months. So you can never know what is going on inside a soul. You can never know, and I attribute that to me holding him to it and keeping him updated on the gory details of what I was going through as I was going through a recall process and a memory process of what had happened in my childhood. Because for me and my body, it got, our minds are brilliant. The mind is absolutely brilliant. It creates, it prevents us from remembering what happened so we can survive, right? But at a certain point, I can really see that my whole life journey was the mission of my life was to remember, but I didn't know that was why I was all over the place in my life and traveling around the world and seeking and looking. What the hell was I looking for? Well, yeah, it was right inside of me. So, yeah, so that it's just what I want to speak to. It is the thing that, for me, in my journey, it is what has set me free. And being witnessed, even if that meant being judged, because you can't control what people are going to think about what you have to say, or if they even believe you. But in a way, I spoke for myself. It was for me to hear myself speak.
Respect is, I really respect and honour all those honest and the honesty and the integrity of everything that's been shared tonight and last night. And I think the energy of all that is also shifting through. Sometimes it feels heavy, but it's moving and shifting all the time. And it's a bit like society is changing, attitudes are changing, and this needs to happen. Of course, it doesn't need to be said, but I just think the more that is spoken, that the responsibility is being taken, and it just allows freedom, as was said. And I think it's just amazing what has been shared. So thank you for all the people that have shared.
A few moments ago, I thought, I won't get up, I'll just stand up there and sob. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Thank you to the men and women who are here. You're right, without talking, we can't move forward, and we need to move forward together. Men and women need to move forward together. How do we do that? I think first of all, we need to believe women. When we say that something's happened to us, we need to be believed. The thing that comes back to me constantly is questions like, why didn't she leave him? That's a big one. Why didn't she leave him? And we know that sometimes we leave a first time, it's horrendous, we go back because we can't take any more, so we go back, and then we leave again, and it's awful again. And last night after we were talking, my friend Christina was here, and she's heard my story. And she goes, Tamara, you didn't mention the bit where he broke your nose. I was like, come on, talk about the nose. Because Jonathan, the moment I decided it was definitely I could not go on any further was when he headbutted me in the face and broke my nose. And that was, that was the moment. And I think sometimes we get to a point where we really can't go back. We absolutely, this is the final straw, and we do finally leave. But when we ask why didn't she leave him, we can also ask, why was he behaving that way? And why are women so terrified to leave? It's because somebody is terrifying them. And so responsibility here. Ooh. One of my big things is asking men to walk beside us and to be allies, and that can be done by, supporting women, definitely. But it also comes with meaningful conversations with other men about what's okay. When Eurydice Dixon died, I was very, 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 very angry, and I said to my brother, well, what are you doing about it? And he works in the mining industry, and he was up on line camp, and he said this morning at check-in, they all have to do a check-in or something in mining, and he said, my brother spoke up, and he said, look, violence against women is not okay. And if anyone's having a struggle with it at home, please come and speak to me. And my brother wrote that to me, and I thought, well, I was very surprised because I was so angry. I couldn't see that someone would do that. So there is a lot of suicide amongst the miners. My brother brought that up. It's fly in, fly out. It's not very easy, and there's things that go with domestic violence that goes with it. I thought, wow, my brother just, he just spoke in a situation that was really hard. It's a very masculine world up there. So I was very grateful to my brother. So I suppose my real thing is that for a very long time, I feel like women have been asking men not to hurt us, and they haven't listened. Or some of them have, but some of them haven't listened. Women have been asking men not to hurt them for thousands of years, and they're not listening. And I believe that men will listen to other men, or I hope, I believe in hope. I think that if enough men say to their mates, hey, that's not okay, that we'll see some change. And I am talking about gender and men and women, but I don't want us to be like this. I want us to walk beside each other. And one of my, there's a poet friend of mine, and he ran men's groups and men's behaviour change programs. And he supported a lot of men through some really bad shit, and he supported men through working through a domestic violence situation and getting their kids back and all of that sort of thing. And unfortunately, he was killed by that tree that fell in the forest. And I was so upset. I thought, of all the people, this man was doing this amazing work with men and making real change. So what is that about? But the men who were in his circle, they still go to men's circle, and some of them really struggle and some of them are doing really well. But I think there's a lot of room for men to be supporting each other to get through the tough times. It's when the times are really tough, that's when things really happen. And so I think that men need a lot of support, and I think that men who are in really tough situations need a lot of support. And I truly believe that if we really support each other and the men stand together and support each other in a positive way, I think there can be change. I believe that. I've seen it, and it's been really interesting to sit just there and really just listen and sorry. And really just listen, One thing I've learned in women's circle is to listen from your heart and speak from your heart. And listen. A lot of the time I do it as well. I listen to react. Oh, what's it saying? Oh, I'm just going to get angry at that. And one of the things I've learned is sometimes you can just listen, and that's what it's actually just about. It's about listening with your heart and listening to take in what somebody's saying and really hear it and take it in, and instead of having those, anger reactions or sadness reactions, they're pretty obvious, but really listening to someone and really, really trying to listen without all the political overlays that go on in my head. So that's something I'm going to take forward. That my parents will tell you, if you ever meet them, that I'm not a very good listener. And they're actually probably right. But I'm going to try harder to do that. And I really hope that actually I already know, because people have said we're very affected by last night. People really listened. And, when you feel heard, that's something else, So I'm gonna try harder to listen without reaction, and but still with a request that we walk forward together, and we support our friends. And I thought I'll add this bit. My dad was a very supportive dad, and he either did the pick up or the drop off, and he used to take us abseiling, and turns out he was scared of heights. So he used to do that to get over his fear of it. But we were always scurrying up or down something, and Dad has always said to me, women can do anything. Always. And poor old Dad. He works in the mining industry, and I'm a hardcore greenie. So it hasn't always been a harmonious house, and I have been known to yell at him. So bless him, he hung in there. Yeah. So gratitude for him and my brother. And I am really glad there's men here tonight. I'm so glad. I'm really grateful. And I'm really glad there's women here tonight. All right, that's it.
It's a nice little story. I have 2 nephews and a niece, and I decided I just learned how to make rag rugs from a lovely person who most of you know. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make a rag rug for each of my nephews and niece. And I asked them all, what are your favourite colours? And they're like 7, 5 and 2, so I got some answers. And I made them in time for Christmas. So I spent a lot of hours sitting and thinking about my nephews and niece while I made these rag rugs. And I thought about what I wanted for them for the future. And my eldest nephew, who's 7 and extremely bright, very precocious, and he's going to do very interesting things in the world, this kid. I said, I wanted some, tell me the colours that you want for your rag rugs. And he said, red and blue and black. Okay, radio. But I couldn't find any black sheets to make the rag rugs out of. And a friend of mine from work, he had some excess clothing, and he's like, do you want to just have a look at the clothing that's going to go to op shop? I'm like, oh, okay. And I found this big black T-shirt. Like, great, cool. I'll tear that up. I'll make that into the edge, the border of this rag rug. Started tearing it up, and I actually looked at the T-shirt, and it was a polished man T-shirt. So I don't know if you've heard about it. There's a really lovely campaign which my really, really beautiful neighbour told me about. My neighbour has a new dad to a little girl, and there's a notion that it's possible to work. It's really important for men to know that it's okay to wear nail polish. It doesn't have to be a feminine thing. That being a girl is not the worst thing in the world. This idea of being a polished man, nail polish, but being a better man. How can we be better men? And my neighbour, he wanted to be a better man for his little daughter. He wanted to protect her. And so, oh my goodness, I'm weaving this polished man T-shirt into the rug for my little nephew. One day I want to have a conversation with these little boys about what it is to be a good person. Man, woman, whatever. What it is to be a polished man. What it is to be better than some of the examples around us. My sister right now is in labour with her 4th child, another boy. And my sister loves watching disaster movies, the end of the world, apocalyptic kind of movies. And she just mentioned, in passing just this evening while she's birthing her 4th child, her 3rd boy. Oh, what am I bringing him into? Well, these young boys have the opportunity to be better, have the opportunity to make difference in the world. We can show them, not through punishment, but through support and helping them to be brave in a way that doesn't mean I've got to be braver than you. No, just be brave internally. Just be solidly internally a good person. So, I hope everything goes well with her. A little bit nerve-wracking, but I so appreciate everyone sharing this evening. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
That sparks something for me to bring to the conversation, that really mothers have all the power. because they're the ones raising the boys. And so really, the issue at hand is it's women as well as the men. It's not just the men, it's the women, it's the mothers who are raising the boys. There's the mother wound. So yeah, I want to speak to that and bring it into the conversation because it's massive. Because that's who, what is it, the hand that rocks the cradle?
If I don't say something now, I'm not going to get a chance. I'm over here. I've been like 5, 6, 7, 8 people. I can't be on camera from what I'm going to say. And I'm just going to keep moving so that I don't stop speaking. But I feel like I need to... I've got so much to say, so I'll just try and keep on my train of thought here. Okay, I'll start with last night when I got home. I was, I felt like an observer enough last night, so I was actually able to. I was really wired when I got home, but it didn't impact me on a that level. But I was hooked for tonight and committed, obviously. I got on Facebook and did a final check at about midnight, and someone had posted a video which I watched. It was interesting, and then I must have dozed off, and when I woke up there was a TED talk on, and guess what she was talking about? Shame. And she said, the one thing that stood out to me, it was Brené Brown. She said, if you put shame in a petri dish and feed it secrecy, silence and judgment, you know, it grows. If you stuck it in a petri dish with compassion, it's got nowhere to go. And I thought, oh, that was really impacting, and had a good sleep. But one thing from last night, I thought, if I go home tonight without saying anything, I'm going to kick myself. I think I need to speak to represent children who have been in domestic violence situations, but not only that, before you go nodding, I can't even look at anyone. My mother was the perpetrator in my house, one of, so much so that she doesn't know where I live. There were several abusers in my life, and one of them is still in my life. And the interesting thing about compassion, when I heard that last night on that video, and I wouldn't have really noticed if I hadn't have, if Angelica, if you hadn't have put that shame slide up, I probably wouldn't have paid attention. I would have just turned it off and gone to sleep. So when I first started trying to get a voice, because I was a little kid, not only watching a mother be violent to my father, I saw things like she broke a fly swat on my sister's face. Things like that were going on as a norm. And when we became adults, I finally got away, and I just felt like I was just surviving till we could escape childhood, which is a pretty crappy way to mete out your childhood. Dad, who left when I was 11, said, but it wasn't that bad. And there was Dad tootling off to work every day from 7:30 till 7 at night. So he didn't really know the half of the hell. So compassion took a really long time to afford my mum, although I had to eventually, because it merged with me heading towards becoming a mother, and I was dead set not wanting girls at all. I was this boy focused. Yeah, I can deal with, but I just honestly thought that I would head into childhood, have a couple of boys, and that'd be it. So 5 miscarriages later, I gave birth to a girl, and all the girl, I don't even know what to call it, but all that came flooding in, and I was like, holy shit. She unlocked a part of me that was softer and not on the back foot and not so much pained warrior. And that's when I really started to, that's actually when I really started to live. That little girl died. And then, I can't believe I'm only crying because you're here. I can tell this story, it's just because you're here and you're listening. 5 more pregnancies later, I had my second live child, who was another girl. And by that time I was like, she'd better be a bloody girl. And she's perfect. She's nearly 14. So it's been a big journey to opening up the massive wound that was actually in our home was perpetrated by my mother. What having and losing my daughter did, and I have to just sidestep here and say, I've got the safest husband in the world, and I think that's why. I think part of the reason why I was able to explore all of this was because he is the safest, possibly too safe. Man. Not a manly man. Doesn't buy into the masculine stuff. I'm sure he probably wouldn't even mind if I said he was a tiny bit feminine. He's very in touch with his feminine side, all 6'5" of him. And I've been able to explore myself because he's safe for me to do that. And he's learned a lot of stuff along the way. We've done a lot of stuff. It's very compelling. So back to compassion, though. It led me to looking at my family history, and I was so interested, again, Angelica, when you started talking about the 7 generations past and the 7 generations hence, that forms a big part of the study that I've done over the last 15 or so years, largely brought about because of the loss of our daughter. I had nowhere to put it, so I had to seek why that happened, why our journey took 15 pregnancies to get 1 kid. So I went back through my mother's family line and found a cesspit of women who had exacted violence on their husbands, their children, and it still puts my stomach in knots, but I found compassion for those people on my family tree because I know that part of my cellular memory comes from how they lived. And it took me, the furthest back I went, and I actually connected with this man. He's my great-grandmother's great-grandfather. Okay, born in 1800, came out here, died in 1856 in Newcastle, Maine. And I'm not descended from him directly. I didn't get here through him, but that's a sidestep as well. I found great healing in pausing at each name. And we were lucky because we had on this same side of the family a really detailed family tree. So I was able to just a name, focus on that name and what little I knew about that person, it's amazing. I don't know if any of you have done this as an exercise, but it is truly amazing how much you can actually tap in to the little bits of energy left of that person and that are still here. It's in the way, you know, your parents were raised and the parents who raised them. It, you know, it travels, it stays with you. And so I guess I just wanted to say that because, yeah, it's not, I don't know if it's trying to redress a balance or anything, but it comes in many forms. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Today. I hope I'm not annoying anybody. I'm up to speak as a survivor. I'm a survivor as carer from the mother that I didn't know. I accepted that that was how people were. Her mother was a bit the same. And then on into 2 bad marriages. The second one I stayed in for, with a break in the middle of 30 years. It was there was no physical violence in any of them, so I never picked up on it. I just thought a lot of this was normal. With my first husband, it was just a quick marriage, pregnant, quick marriage that didn't even last a year. And it was just an unsuitable marriage. And I don't think it was anybody's fault or anything. It was just unsuitable. He wasn't ready, and I was a child as well, even though I was 21. But I was a child. I was a child till a long time ago, till a very short time ago. My second marriage, I married a man who was working in a bank. I should have seen the red flags very early on, but I didn't because of this, I guess, from Mum, that I just accepted too much. A psychologist has since told me it's I have a learned helplessness that I'm still fighting, wherein I won't argue for myself with anybody. I find any sort of conflict or negotiation difficult and will not do it. Until lately, I've been trying a bit harder on that. And I sort of feel as now that I'm older, I'm allowed to say things because I am 73, as I said before, nearly 74. So the second husband, it was a nasty thing, and it was a thing of not knowing. And I guess that's what I like to get across, because you did say that you might use this for other potential victims or victims, to explain that in no way did I always felt I was always frightened my whole life. I was berated by my mother for being a scaredy cat and being scared of my shadow and everything always, which I guess didn't help. But, I mean, what do? If you're frightened, you're frightened. However, where was I going from that? Anyway, let's just say that I went into this second marriage. I came across a man that I met who was to be potentially a really good father, because by this stage I had 2 children. I have Irish twins. Irish twins are very, very close together, 6 months between, 6 weeks conception difference. 10 and a half months. So there's 10 and a half months between my first 2 children, and they're commonly referred to as Irish twins because of the Catholic thing and people having lots of children. But yeah, funny thing was I was a Catholic too. I was, anyway. But yeah, so by the time the marriage had broken up, I was pregnant with my second child, even though my other one was only 3 months old. And by that stage I knew I was pregnant. So I wandered on with that, and then I had a big think about it, and I thought, well, that's it. No men now. I've got 2 children, a boy and a girl. They're lovely children. I will look after them. I will go back to my studies, and because I'd finished studies, because she kept chasing me out of the house to stop studying and go out with boys and things. So that was a weird thing, but that was, I know I had a mind of my own, and that's the thing about the domestic violence, isn't it? That I think, is important to get across, is that, yes, you do have a mind of your own, but somehow it doesn't work. I'm quite intelligent. I'm not being with it. And I do have a mind of my own. But I went into a marriage with a man who offered everything, groomed me basically, and married him. One of the first things he did was to withdraw some $200 that I had set aside for a rainy day, because he could do better things with it. Or because he was in the bank, you see. He was a banker, you know. And it's just weird. I mean, I know this to be untrue now when I'm saying it, and ridiculous, and I can understand somebody not believing it. But this is how we behave, especially if you're from my generation as well. I guess, no, that's no excuse for that one. But so we went on, and I had 2 children by him because he wanted a son. I would have just stayed with the one at 3. But that's just this beautiful son I spoke to you about, who's been a total gift. And got one child through local university. We lived in the country. He took me to the country. Immediately there was a rift between my mother and myself with him, but between him and my mother and me in the middle all the time, which went on forever, and I found out more later. And I found out more. So eventually, I'm sorry, I'll go over time. One minute. So everything was just as normal. I studied part-time, worked part-time first, then studied part-time as well, got a science degree, started working, and then all of a sudden one night he comes home to me and tells me that he has been charged by the police for fraud and embezzlement. At this stage he had left the bank, and the amount of money was $300,000. He was trying to run a business. So I was actually the sole provider at that stage because the business was doing nothing. I could see they were doing everything wrong. I told them. They had one overdraft, and then they came to me for another overdraft on our house, of all things. When I opened the account for the house, as it was such a serious thing, I did put my foot down there and said that it must be a joint account and everything must be signed by both of us. Nonetheless, he managed to withdraw all the money that had been put from my wages into that to pay that house off because we were late age then. I was in my 40s by then, I think. And so the bank, I found a note after he told me about this thing about being arrested and charged. I found a little bank thing that was a business card had been put in the letterbox, and it had written on the back, "Please see me about your housing loan being overdue." My whole wages went in each fortnight. It couldn't be, but anyway, it was. He'd taken that too, as well as the embezzlement. So the house was lost in the end because, and this is the really important thing, is that we now have some things. I saw on the end of that, I mentioned it to Sue. On the end of that, there's the tools. If people go right down to the bottom of that, there was nothing of that then. I am a very strong, dependent woman, and I did do everything within my power to find help about this situation, the bank and everything. I got no assistance. The bank showed me a forged signature on the second overdraft. It was very, very good, but I did not sign that. So I'd always blamed the bank for letting him take it out, but they showed it to me in the end when I went to them. So I had none of this assistance, and that assistance is there now. And the very important thing about women and violence, which I think is the subject, that we can now do something. We're learning. I know Wire did a great big research project on financial ability for women, and they're now running courses for it. So if you ring them and you've got those sort of problems now, that will be fixed because don't have enough energy to help them like I'd like to in there, unfortunately. They do wonderful work. But there's all these things. I couldn't go to Wire because I was too far down. I was in the country. I was 3 hours from Melbourne. I think have I got a bit of a message across that, yes, you can do it. It can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter how strong or how bright you are. It also doesn't matter how financially literate you are, which is a lot of people think it's an illiteracy of money with women, but it's not an illiteracy. It's with all the other things. And some of these are a pathological thing. They're not the bloke that has been misled or had a bad life. His behaviour was pathological. 6 years after he died, I woke up with a flashback of him strangling me. Trying to letting me drown. We were in an inlet at Envelope. There's a tidal river, and the tide changed, and I couldn't get a footing. He's a very strong swimmer. Claimed to have been a surf club. The kids, when my younger daughter joined the Torquay Surf Club, she found out that his name is nowhere to be seen. He did not have a bronze medallion. He did not do anything with them at all. He was not known there. And what my kids keep finding these sorts of weird things out, like where he played football for, and it's just bizarre. But yeah, and that was what he liked. He had this persona around him, and he was pathological. It wasn't that he was bad. Well, it is bad. Pathologicals are bad. They don't have any conscience, and yes. And so, yes, and I had that, and then I remember other occasions of him after that. This has only been coming out since 2012, so it's 8 years now. He's been dead 13 years. I did go back to him after I separated from 2 years after all this house and money stuff. So, yes, those women out there, if there's any of you there, don't feel bad about it. Yeah, we do it. Yeah. Anyway, so I think I could finish there. I think I've got a few points across from a person, a survivor though. I'm not a victim. You're not a victim. We're survivors. We're here. Sorry if I spoke too long.
So I'm just aware of the time. We're just on 10 o'clock. Is there anything else sitting in the room? Any last stories that want to share? Yeah, okay. Yep, okay, yep. No, it's fine.
I just wanted to just take this a little bit further, and something that on my deck I think about all the time. And it's about the fact that, earlier I was saying about having great men in the room, and to Murray, I was saying about people, having men that can reach out and speak to other men. And the thing that really, I suppose the question that I have, and what I'm constantly wondering is how do we reach those people that won't listen? Those men that just continue to perpetrate these crimes. These men that just leave this trail of destruction. And I know they still exist, and I'm terrified of them. I've tried to learn all of the ways of recognising these people. I know, things to look out for, red flags, and it just means that I've withdrawn. I withdraw completely because of fear. But how do we take what we're doing here? What do we do? How do we take this information and actually get this through to the people that won't listen? It's wonderful. We are sitting here, we talk about it, we're listening to each other. My ex lives very nearby, and that was part of the reason why I was actually very nervous about coming to this location, because I know that he will have seen my car. he knows that our eldest daughter has been through trauma counselling. He signed on for that. He had to, as her father, sign on for her to have trauma counselling. So he's fully aware of the impact that he's had on us ongoing. He's tried to continue to impact on us financially, and in many ways he still impacts my day-to-day because I still have, I wake up randomly and I still go and do a boundary check. It's in my memory. It's just what I do every night, and people that know me will often know that I'm online at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because that's when some of my worst trauma occurred. And so that's when I have this memory and it wakes me up and I go do a boundary check. I keep us safe and make sure those crocodiles are still in the moat and they're awake. We still get stalked by this person, and this is 6 years later. This person should know the impacts of what his behaviour is having, but continues to do it. One of the silly things that happened with me, and this goes back to what we've learned as women through history and how we've learnt from our parents, our grandparents, and religion, how to behave. You know, I grew up in a very strict Baptist, Germanic upbringing, and women were the housewives that, you know, did what they were told, really. But this stalking business, I just wanted to go back to this. It was interesting because my little one was very upset by this, and she has been upset, and she's fearful when she sees this behaviour unfolding. And my first response, years later, after having lots of counselling myself, after having my daughters through trauma counselling, after all these things and thinking that I've learnt so much, and my daughter says to me, "Mum, I don't like it, you know." And I still made excuses for him. I looked at her in the eye and I said, maybe he just wants to have a look at you. Maybe he wants to see what you look like. Maybe he wants to see how beautiful you are, you know. And I'm trying to soften this behaviour and trying to make her feel better at the same time. And this little girl, she looks at me and she goes, "Mum," she says, "I don't care if he wants to know what I look like." She said, "It's inappropriate and he shouldn't be doing it." And this is where I look at my daughters and I go, wow, you know, like something there is a change here. You know, there's been, I believe, a leap in behaviour change because this little girl, she's so much smarter than I was. But my question still remains, how do we get this message to the people that don't want to listen? That's it.
A bit of an answer to that, but it's not the best. I think we learned I'm studying as an OT, and we learned that 50% of what we know and all the interventions and the evidence-based practice will be found out to be wrong within 5 years. But there's more and more people getting educated. So more and more that we do know is right is adding to it as well. And my niece is Indigenous, and Pauline Hanson just a couple of weeks ago sort of questioned the domestic violence and everything in Indigenous communities, and she's felt that they have to be held responsible. But I feel they're not in a business. Their culture's broken and everything, and at present they're not. I heard Ralph de Heer, the person who made the Tracker series, give a speech, and he believed that reconciliation really won't happen for another 200 years. But through my niece has just got a diploma in social work through VACA, and it's just it's an Indigenous education place, and it's just run by Indigenous people, and they're getting the knowledge, and it's giving them a sort of a Western education which still maintains their culture, and they can take control of it. I think there's a potential we can sort of learn from that, but it is still, I think the evidence-based practice is really still slow in having it trickle down to work. But I think it is improving. My great-great-uncle was the first person in Victoria to be charged with incest. And that came about because the laws changed. About every man's home was his castle, and the police weren't allowed to investigate what happened in the houses. And we've come so far away from that.
I can't give you any great hope. I feel we have to keep working on support structures. I was talking to Kylie, the nurse educator, last night, because she's getting it, and her nurses are getting it from patients in fear, lashing out. I said, well, what happened to that generation of surgeons? We know the ones that used to throw scalpels past your head into the wall. She said, they're still there. So all that's been done within healthcare, all those right things being said, we still haven't had that generational change that we need. So in the meantime, it's stay solid, people.
I think the answer is it's complicated. It's very complicated. But I'm sure dialogue's part of it. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for bringing your stories and yourselves and participating in this little community pilot Imogen's tried to get up. See how we go. Listen to go to the toolbox if you're in trouble. There's but it sounds kind of obvious, but talk to somebody, reach out to somebody. Could be me, could be someone here, Anyway, with that, I'm going to say good night and thank you for coming. And maybe we'll try this again next year on something else. All right, good work. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.